So, what can we learn about the basics of this church in Ephesus just by reading this book in Ephesians? I think one thing that we know we can learn from it is that, you know, Paul was in prison when he wrote this book. He was in prison. And there's really no real reason why he writes it. You know, in his other books, he says, you know, I'm writing because I've heard of such and such thing. You know, there's been a division in the church, or you know, you guys are doing good, but, you know, you're kind of missing the mark in this area. You're like kind of, you know, you have this attitude, but really you need to be having this attitude. But you don't see that in this book. No. What you see here is, it just seems like it's a general checkup. A general checkup. So Paul is writing a letter from prison, and he's just popping in saying, hey, I'm here in prison, and you guys are doing good.
Dear churchgoers, that's me, Paul. I'm in prison. There's no particular reason for me writing. I'm just writing from prison.
And if we look in Revelation, we can learn a little bit more about Ephesians, about this church in Ephesus. In Revelation 2, when John, who had this sleep fest in this cave, and he received this vision, and God told him to write a letter to these 7 churches. This church in Ephesus was the first church that he wrote to, and he's commending them for their good works, that this church is doing a great job at standing for truth, but they lost track of their first love, that being Christ. So I think it's pretty safe to say that this church was doing good on the outside. And even their intentions were good. It wasn't like they had evil intentions or anything like that to make themselves look like they were good, like the Pharisees. But they just kind of got wrapped up in doing these good things that they kind of forgot the whole reason why they were doing it, and that's because of Christ's love. But I don't think that's necessarily the reason. That's not the reason why Paul is writing. So I think still, while he's writing this letter to this church, they're still doing good, and they still have remembered their first love and where they've come from. But if you look and if you actually count, Paul uses the word love 19 times. 19 times. That's more than he uses that. He's never used the word love that many times in any other of his letters. So, I have a theory. I'm thinking, okay, so maybe at this point, you know, the church is doing good, and they still remembered their first love, and obviously along the way, they've kind of lost focus and lost that passion that they had. And today what we're going to be looking at is Ephesians 6:10. So Paul immediately says, hey, we are having this battle. We got some more going on. And it's not a physical battle, but it's a spiritual. It's in a realm that we can't see. And he's saying, we're not, our battle isn't physical. It's spiritual. We can't even see. It's like, there's a whole different realm that we can't see. I don't even think we can fully imagine. I mean, and it's pretty intense. And he's saying, we gotta be prepared. And I think this alarms. This is meant to kind of alarm us. And so he lists this armor that we need to put on, and it's like, well, so what's the big deal? Like, what? The belt of truth and the breastplate of righteousness. Like, what's that all about? Like, you gotta think, like, in that time, how is that exactly comfortable? Like, oh yes, we got the belt of truth, But if you look in Isaiah 59, Paul isn't just pulling these pieces of armor out of his butt. No, he's drawing this. He's pulling this from Scripture in Isaiah. And he says, in Isaiah 59, it says that, God looked and saw evil looming on the horizon, so much evil that no sign of justice. He couldn't believe what he saw. Not a soul around to correct this awful situation. So he did it himself, took on the work of salvation fueled by his own righteousness. He dressed up in righteousness, put it on like a suit of armor with salvation on his head like a helmet, put on judgment like an overcoat, and threw a cloak of passion around his shoulders. So it's like Paul's drawing from this Scripture, and he's saying, guys, yeah, we've got this spiritual warfare going on, but guess what? We can put on God's armor. God's armor. I don't know about you, but that's pretty encouraging to know that we, mere humans, can put on God's armor to help protect us in this spiritual battle. That's pretty cool if you ask me.